At Relentless Digital, we believe in breaking barriers and driving innovation. That's why we are extremely proud to sponsor the Power Women of the Trades podcast, supporting the voices and success of women in the home service industry. Together, we're creating a future where talent shines, regardless of gender, and diversity thrives. Join our journey at relentless-digital.com and always be relentless in your pursuit of excellence.
This episode of Power Women of the Trades is also brought to you by Forrest Perry of Forrest Perry Digital Marketing. Want to generate more leads for your service business? Trust his team to deliver quality new customer leads and protect your brand online. Check out perrymarketing.com today.
Hello everyone. We want to give a quick shout out to our amazing partner, Rilla, the game changer in the home service industry. Rilla's virtual ride-along software means no more physical ride-alongs. With Rilla, you can coach your team virtually 100 times faster and boost your close sale rates like never before. Don't miss out. Join the movement today and watch your sales soar. Visit RILLA.com/PWT to learn more.
Welcome to Power Women of the Trades podcast. This show is all about breaking barriers and changing the game. Our guests will feature some of today's most successful female entrepreneurs and other advocates of our industry as well. Because if there's one thing we know for sure, female-led entrepreneurship drives change on multiple levels. We want to empower women in the trade industry like you so you can maximize your potential, stay balanced, achieve long-term success, and claim ownership over your life. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Power Woman of the Trades podcast with Cassie and Heather. Today we have Kelcey Brueggeman with Service Business Evolution. We are ready to hear the story. We had some pre-show chat that we had to just stop talking because we knew that I was like, this is the stuff we need to share. This is the stuff that we need to talk about. And so Service Business Evolution is a best practice type group that she'll get more into. But Kelcey, tell us your story. How did you get into these trades?
Well, back up to, I went, my college degree was in exercise science and physiology. And so I worked at ASU with sports medicine and Pat Tillman. And it was just all, crazy background.
Wow.
Fast forward to,
different.
Right. And I was in cardiology and stress testing and all this stuff. And then I had a baby, stayed home. That's when I first met the first mentor I had in the trades, who was Paul Kelly, who was the owner of Parker & Sons in Phoenix, Arizona, which is still currently the largest HVAC and electrical company in Phoenix. I think they're like 180 million or something like that at this point.
Wow.
On the Aware Group now. But he had started another business that was like an Angie's List called To Fix It. And he needed somebody to do some marketing. And so I started doing that. He became a mentor, a really great mentor. But fast forward to, 6 years I was with him. And then I was in outside sales with the big wire and cable, with work boots and a work hat, out on the, I loved it, but I missed being part of something that I could help grow. And that's when I met Jim Probst, who is one of my business partners now today in SBE and was the owner of, or one of the owners of George Brazil Air Conditioning and Heating, the second largest air conditioning and heating contractor in Phoenix. And that was when I learned the difference between leadership and management, honestly. And that was just part of my story. And they had started at SBE. His brother had, because he had retired out of that business and he needed help because it started growing really fast. And Jim said, I'm going to bring Kelcey over because she's worked with contractors in this other company that was like the Angie's List. And I'm going to mentor her. And so he made me general manager. And I was like, wow, I've never thought I could have this general manager title. Like it didn't even cross my mind. And he let me run that business like it was mine and mentored me along the way. And I was president for 5 years. And most recently, it's a longer story, but most recently I actually went and asked him to create a board so that we could scale and grow and think about retirement, honestly. And they made me an equal partner about 2 or 3 years into that 13 years ago. So anyway, now I brought him back as CEO and president, and I'm now the executive vice president of business development because that's kind of, that is my superpower of what I love to do is just relationships. And you know what I mean? And I can't travel and build all those relationships for SBE and run the company at the same time. So that's where I'm at now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So,
That's an amazing jump though, from sports medicine or, health career
Nothing
into the
to do
trades.
with, right. And again, it has to do with mentors that I think believe in somebody and see something in somebody. And I just always was soaking everything in I could. And Cassie, we talked earlier, but earlier on in SBE days, I remember you were a part of our organization.
Yeah.
And part of our name is evolution for a reason too, because we also have this contract behind us. So we're able to constantly evolve our training, but it hasn't always been perfect for every contractor. And I think that the time that we met was when we were working and started working with all of the Carrier and Bryant contractors through Watsco. And then you were
part of that was like, man, like probably like 8 years ago. And, you know, some of that pre-show talk that we were talking about was, you know, I can't go back and tell you why we didn't stay with SBE, but I can tell you that I probably wasn't mature enough not like mature in mature. Like I was not wise enough as a leader or an owner. Neither one of us were. Like we had, I think about 8 years ago, had really just started thinking about what was possible. And so whenever I see this all the time, and this is why I think having a best practice group and not an individual coach, but the group is so important, because you start getting exposed to things that you had no idea was part of your business. Like how often does that happen where even today, 10 years in, and where Heather, how many employees do we have? Like 80 something employees?
Nearly 80 employees. But you're absolutely right, because you know, if you think about it, contractors like you and Oscar started the business a little over 10 years ago. You don't know what you don't know, you know, grow and build the company as fast as you can. And you get to that $1-2 million mark. And it's kind of when you start realizing, and this is what I was saying before, like, well, I need a little bit more help. I need to know what I don't know. I need to start seeking out some assistance in whatever area of your business. You've got, you know, the culture, you've got scaling, you've got managing KPIs and starting to understand what that means. And I think smaller companies starting out don't even realize, they don't know how important that is, and how important correct financials are, and how important culture is, and how
and like for me, I felt like I could always build a culture, and I can go back to that because 8 years ago, the culture of this business versus the culture now is significantly different. But I had to grow as a leader, and Oscar had to grow. We had to grow in what that was going to look like. But there's still like, even still things today that blow my mind when people come ask me for like permission or something. I'm like, why am I capable of making budget right now?
Well, as a smaller business, you know, the owners of the company kind of are the boss of everything. And as you grow, that becomes a little too hard to manage. And you don't want it to be managed that way. I think in my experience, what I've seen is owners that can't let go of control don't grow, because there's no way that you can scale a business and be the one, you know, end all be all go-to person. And I've seen so many owners say, well, you know, I want to be the one to make all the decisions. That's going to stifle your business. It's completely going to stifle your business.
I was watching one of your podcasts with Sarah Hammond, and you talked about how you have to get uncomfortable in order to grow. And I think that that's truly the case. I mean, I think the first time, you know, Jim, my mentor, Jim Probst, he got me a coach early on, because he knew it was like I was like herding squirrels, because I was working with other owners who didn't like to be employees, and that was an issue. And so I had my first business coach, and she changed the game for me. But then he also put me into and allowed me to get into a CEO group when I was a general manager, and that scared me. Right, I entered into that, and I ended up, you know, I was in it for 3 years, best experience of my life. One of my closest friends is the CEO of RSI that we're still so close. And it's like, at the time I was so outside of my, you know, I just norm. By the time I ended up leaving the group, it was because I was contributing more than I was getting at that point. You know what I mean?
And that's the evolution of growth as a leader.
Right.
You know, you start somewhere, and all of the mentors that I've had, you know, they give you pieces of advice and nuggets that always stick with you. And if you think about it, you know, some of the best pieces of advice you got early on, or I got early on, or any of us got early on, will hit differently if you think about that same advice now.
Yeah, there's definitely pieces that I can go back to like 8 years ago that I could be like, that's never going to happen here. Not at quality, not at this wouldn't do this. And now 8 years later, I can say, maybe it didn't happen the exact way, but there was some truth in it. But I had to have the emotional intelligence growth to be able to get there. And I think that I see that so often. And I just want to like protect. I'm a protector by nature. I don't know if anyone knew that about me. And I want to protect these new businesses from like the vultures that are out there, or these new entrepreneurs, because I love that spirit and that one belief, but they're like, you're shooting like a fire hose at them, and they can't comprehend and take it all in. And then most often their emotional intelligence is not also there yet either. And there's just so much that you've got to grow in people don't just go 0 to 100 million in 4 years or whatever. You know, you've heard all these stories, right? But every single time it wasn't just like a mom and pop owner that somebody started mentoring them and helping them and pushing them, and like even with Heather, for example, we went all these years in big revenue dollars without a CFO. And now, like, I love to give her a hard time because I will spend some money and she will do it. And we're just going to get out our dirty laundry right now. I'm just kidding.
No, that's fine. She's not wrong. I'm just like, what are we doing? Wait. I'm pumping the brakes and Cassie's full speed ahead.
That's Erin on my team. She does that for us too.
And I'm always like, and I know to some degree she doesn't want me to make her the bad guy, and everyone knows because I'll be like, Heather's going to kill us. Heather's wigging out on me right now. I guarantee you. But it's kind of like in the back of my mind that I've created that I know I have the police now that are telling me
accountability. Yep.
There's some accountability. Now, sometimes I'm still going to go rogue and I tell her like, it's fine. It'll be fine. But
when I came on with quality, it was perfect because for years, Cassie and I have been friends a long time. Mm-hmm. And when I came on, the kind of running joke in the company was we're on the brink. And then finally I was just like, no, we are here. We just need to stop making excuses and we're going to take off. And the company has done it's been growing great and wonderful since the beginning, with trials and tribulations that we all go through. But there was a huge shift in November of last year. And I have seen our team completely make a 180 and take accountability and ownership of their roles. And we have pushed the company forward so amazing. And I think
what happened in November?
The shift, one of the biggest pieces of our shift was the accountability, but just like Heather coming in and being that, when you build a company with a lot of people without industry experience, it's just a lot of things, right? It's just getting the right leaders into place and the right resources and the right life experience, but also just like Heather said it best, like we're no longer working for a paycheck. This is a mission, and it's not just,
we're no longer working for the company or for a paycheck. We're working for the company as the company. Mm-hmm. We're no longer individuals. We are a team. We all win together or we lose together.
Our leadership team just like came together and it's been remarkable, but it's just, I think some of those things, do I believe that could have happened 2 years ago that same way? No, like we had to grow. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is like, I just want to take these new companies and these new leaders sometimes and be like, hold on, pushing growth.
Yeah. I mean, we did EOS a year and a half ago and we interviewed EOS coaches and then my team said, Kelcey, you could do this. We don't like the coaches. We just want you to try to implement it. And which it actually was the best thing that happened to us. We had a lot more accountability. Meetings were a lot more structured. We got a lot more things done, more aligned. And so I think everybody has to try different things. And I think it's also why, like, we'll have companies come into our, coaching and training company and stay with us we still have companies who have been with us for all 13 years, but we'll have companies come in for 2 years, leave, go to BDR or Nexstar or Praxis, and then they'll be with them for a year or two, and then they'll come back to us. And I think it's normal because they like to try and see different things. And I think that's healthy for companies just to, check out different things from time to time as well. But definitely you need an accountability coach to some degree, but also you were talking, Cassie, earlier about SBE in the earlier days and then having this community. And I think that's what we've evolved to is now we have all these mastermind groups. So now it's owners sharing best practices. It's like, it's not just the $50 million company behind us. You don't need to be like them. They're willing to share their price books and all of their stuff, but it's all these other owners within the community that can share best practices and their pain points, and you help solve their problems. And that's also, and I love that also. And that's one of the reasons that I became part of Women in HVACR, is wanting to be with more women in the community and help, other women leaders rise up, and find, other ways like that as well.
So can we, Heather, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, there's been a huge shift in our industry in the last 6-7 years.
Yeah.
People were not typically willing to share anything with another owner. There was this fear that was throughout the industry. And over the last 5-6 years, we've seen those mastermind groups come out where people are like, okay, we can win together. This is not, even in my area, there's HVAC plumbing companies in my area that I've helped out when I was still running Sky Heating here because we're all in this together. There's plenty of work for everybody. And I think a lot of people have learned and understood over the last couple of years that we're all going to win if we can help each other.
Yeah. So with SBE, what's the entry point now? Is there,
like size contractor? It's a good question because I think back when you were there, we didn't know what that should be or what it looked like. Technically, I would say 3 or more trucks is where we can make the biggest impact.
Okay.
If the owner is either not in the truck or willing to get out of that truck the first year, that's the only way that we'll bring them on.
Right.
Because if they're in the truck, we just can't make enough of an impact for them. And And, it was funny. I had a conversation with the president of Lennox about a month ago, and he said something to me because I asked him who his target customer was and what his goals were for the year. And he said they need to have a service manager in place, and that means they're 4 million. And I was like, I never thought of it that way. But because where we make our impact is normally with the service technician and the customer service process. That's our niche. That's what we're so good at. And it's like this, having that service manager in place or getting them in place and having them become that mentor, that coach, and develop and continue to develop and have a culture where people never want to leave. That's what we do. So I was like, oh, I love that. So, that's a $4 million mark, which is a little bit bigger than where we typically are.
I think what happens is a lot of times people get into that 2 million and then they start looking. And for me, I have a hard time putting my name behind somebody if I don't have any proof, or I just don't, I want to be the reason why someone goes all in with someone and then it's bad because it was bad, not because of them. You know what I mean? And so I'm always super careful with who I refer and how I do that. And so, but there's so much, because I remember just where we're at now, getting into Nexstar is you have to be doing more revenue, right? And it had to be that way. And so, but there's still that mark. There needs to be companies like SBE. There needs to be groups like SBE that can be for that smaller contractor still, because there's so much that needs to be learned in that time frame. And
there's more of the foundation that needs to be built at a smaller size.
Yeah, you know what we started to do? And because at first I used to be, because of all the PE firms and everything that's going on, because George Brazil actually was bought by a PE firm 3.5 years ago. So we were part of that whole thing, and we're still affiliated with them, and we still train 16 of that PE firm's contractors. But I started partnering because I have a marketplace with SBE, similar to what some of the other best practice groups do. And so I partnered with 3 different business brokers, and I really got educated a lot by them about what's going on. And so that we started bringing them in to train our contractors, because when our contractors first come in, we want them now to get a free business valuation so that they understand what their business is worth today. Because what happens is they get to a point to where they get burned out and they're done. And then someone comes in and tells them their baby's ugly. And sorry, but you're going to have to work 2 to 5 more years in order to even be able to sell it for what you think you thought you could sell it for. So I like that now, where they'll educate them and also take the fear away from all these phone calls, because they're all getting emails and phone calls. And it's coming back around the 7-year mark where the PE firms are now selling off all their companies, and then it's never going to stop. So it's whether they want to sell it to a son, a daughter, an employee, an ESOP, whatever it is, they still need to know the value of it. And there's going to be a transaction one day and a retirement one day, and we want them to plan for that. So I think we had probably 10 companies sell in the last year that have been with us and been with SBE. And even though they ended up leaving, because normally most of those companies have their own coaching and training within, it's like we did our job. We helped them, but clean financials is a big thing.
Have you found when you're doing those valuations for the owners that the owners typically think that their company is worth far more than it really is?
Oh yeah. Yeah. They think that $1 million in a bank, that, it's worth somewhere between $1 million and $5 million. Right. And so, and these business brokers really taught them what does 5X versus 10X mean and 12X. And it has, for instance, one example would be the number of maintenance agreement customers in your system. And most of them hate maintenance agreements. And so we teach them the beauty of them and why they, and how you can treat them differently. And you don't have to go twice a year. You never let them expire. And you have to have those customers in your system to have that company be worth money one day. And to fill your board in the off season, because you just start calling the ones that are 10 years and older, where there's going to be more opportunities. And so they just need to learn.
I think that, you hit a good point there. And this goes back to, what does it take to grow from 2 million to 5 million, from 5 million to 8 million, from 5 to 10 million. And then, as you get bigger. And I was actually just talking to Katie Higgins about this last week, because she's grown her company massively in the last 18 months. And she's kind of at that point, okay, which steps do I make next? Which moves do I make next in order to get to that next step? And from 1 to 2 million, 2 to 5 million, all of those things are different. And she and I had a really good conversation about that, because when you are going from 5 to 10 million, you usually have one key person in each spot, or maybe not even in each spot of the company. And then figuring out strategically how to add that additional person can be difficult. Can the company afford the cost of it? How are you going to develop that?
Because that
what value are they going to bring?
Starts to come down if they're not careful. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. We see that a lot. And I think too, we do better with that. To Cassie's point, I would say that 2 to 6 million is really where we can make the biggest impact. We can get them to, if they're not at double-digit net profit, we can get them there within a year. We have no problem doing that, because we get their pricing right first, and then we start talking about the maintenance agreements and how they compensate their people, and we get the average tickets up. We're good at helping them slow down on calls and maximize those calls, right? And make more money and take take care of your customers. That's what it's about, taking care of the customer.
And those are all strategic pieces that play into it. If you have one thing that is not right, I think the ability to pivot and recognize that quickly, because you've got, being priced right, having the right culture, taking care of the customer the way that they need to be taken care of, or spending the time with that customer to build the value and the trust that we want to build as business owners with our customer base. And then, thinking, how does that play into, adding more to overhead, or, we need to add more trucks, and when do you add more trucks, and how do you know if that's going to benefit your business or not? And what are the exercises that you go through in order to determine, do you add another manager? Do you add another support staff? This is something that, I talk about a lot is, you can do a lot with the same support, like administrative overhead that you're running in your current situation, because everybody tends to get a little bit complacent. I think if they can handle their job, they're okay with that, but they really can handle a lot more than they think they can. And Cassie and I were talking about that.
I think the mistake though that some of them make is like they'll say, okay, we need a service manager. Okay, who's the best technician to be the service manager?
Right.
No. The biggest mistake everybody makes. Right?
And it's so hard to get a tech-minded person into a manager person, because they don't want to always make the shift.
One of the ways that we've done it at George Brazil that I really do, and it has worked, I've seen it, is they create field trainers first. There's techs that are they're really good at what they do, and they like to help their peers, and so they do ride-alongs, and then you see how that works, because then they're also earning the trust of all those technicians. But again, there's admin work, there's leadership that's involved. I mean, they need to have a mentor themselves.
Well, and I think a good trial run option for somebody who wants to move into a management role from the field, because there's a big shift. It's a complete different mind shift to go into a management role versus a technical role.
And some of them will hate it.
Yeah, that's happened a few times. And then it's like, then I always say, number one, if you want to make the shift from field to manager, you need to know that it comes with a pay decrease almost always, because you're used to a different pay cycle or pay setup, and it's not going to be the same. So you've got to be ready for a pay decrease. That comes with a shift in things. That's what's important to you. But then if it doesn't work out, are you humble enough to say, I just want to go back into the field? And most of the time they aren't. And then they just leave and go find the technician role somewhere else. And it's like, you give up the company that, and so that's like, there's a lot of really hard questions you have to ask yourself as a current technician if you're going to be ready for as a leader. And then as a leader, sometimes it's just like,
they're going to make more money. Because I mean, if you're spiffing them, if you're, all of that stuff. I mean, our technicians are with their customer service process, and most of our companies, they're making six figures, and they're paying off their cars and their houses and going, taking their family to Disneyland. I mean, that's what we're about. And they're doing it by taking care of customers and doing it the right way. And so we just love that.
I think a lot of them think that, or maybe not a lot of them. I know that some technicians feel like, becoming a manager of the department that they've been servicing may be the next step in their career, but it isn't necessarily. I mean, some would be better as a field.
Are going and starting their own business. They'll do that.
And there's a lot of growth that happens or has to happen when a technician makes that shift, because they have spent their entire career serving the customer, and they're moving into a role where they're serving the employees of the company. And it's a different motivating factor. And like Cassie said, it's usually less money to go into a management role. So you really have to go into it wanting to grow in that leadership type of role. It's not like the next step in your career necessarily, if that's not what you're going to be happy doing.
I think things like, I've been a sponsor with women in HVACR for 4 years now. And I didn't know anything about their mentor program at all. I really didn't know, besides just hearing about it here and there or whatever. And now that I've learned so much more about it, it's like, I wish that's available for everybody, man or woman, in whatever organization, right? Because you can be fill out a thing and say, I want to be a service manager one day. I want to be a CEO one day, and be paired with someone who's in that role or has been in that role. And I think that's what people need is, you know what I mean? And I've whenever people have asked me, what, if you were me, what would you do now? And they're early in their career. I said, you need to go out on LinkedIn and all these places or whatever, and figure out, who do you want to be like? Who do you look up to and you think they're the best, and reach out to them. If you've got people local, invite them to lunch, ask them to jump on a Zoom call, find out how they got where they got. And you need to find mentors if you don't already have them.
Yeah. And I think it's important to see have a mentor of someone that's already doing the position, so you can really understand what it is, because we've had leaders come into our position with us that are no longer here. And every time on that exit of what happened, and the writing was on the wall, and their response always is, leading was way more than I expected it to be, because there's an emotional piece of it that you have to be available emotionally for your team at all times.
And be able to make the hard decisions, right? When it's hard.
So you have to make the hard decisions, but then you also have to be available to these people at all times. And then depending on how many people you as the leader are in charge of, how many days in a row have you, Jeff Stagnoli told me one time when I was having a day and I was just like, I feel like every day when I come in, someone's losing it on something and he said, Cassie, when was the last time you had 55 good days in a row? And I said, I haven't. And he said, you have 55 people that work there. So it's always someone's turn. And I was like, literally, I needed, that was something that tells me every day, remind myself, not every day is a shit show, right? It's just every day someone's turn that they're having a moment and they're allowed to have that. But when you are responsible for, let's see, as the service manager, you have 15 people, you're going to have someone every day, right? That's got something going on. Or maybe you might have a 3-day stretch, but then you have someone, but that's how it goes. But when you realize now you're responsible for that and you're helping them work through it, and that's a lot, that's a weight that I don't know that people who transition from the field sometimes always understand, because I think they just see this like, oh, well, of course we're only going to come out and tell you all the happy things in the team meeting and all that, and so.
Well, and you're no longer a peer. When you go from a technician role into a management role, the people that you're managing are not your peers anymore. You have to elevate yourself to a different level. And like Cassie said, somebody's always got a problem. It's not necessarily the same person, but somebody's having something happen in their life. And another piece of that leadership is it's our job we don't get to bring our emotion into it. We need to be there for that technician or that office person that is having a moment, because they're the ones who are going out there serving the customers. And if we can get their head straight before they go out into the field, they're going to serve the customer better. They're going to feel better about themselves. They're going to feel supported at the company. But being in that management role that kind of becomes that person's job. And somebody coming out of the field into that role may not necessarily do that well or understand that that's kind of a major part of that role.
And I think too, that brings up a good point about one-on-ones, right? So I've always believed in that. I've done it with everyone in my company. When I was in the president role for the last 5 years, every single employee I met with, I went from 30 minutes to 15 minutes, but it was more about personal, like how is your family, what's going on, just to get to know them. But of course, for us, we're 100% virtual. So it's hard to build relationships across the country when you've got people in 7 states. So we had to deal with that too. But I think one-on-one is where you can find out what is going on with people. If there is something that you can help, support them in, that they're not going to stay in a group. And so it's just really important. We believe in one-on-one coaching for it doesn't matter whether you're a CSR or, you're a leader, you need one-on-one time so that you can have that time. I think it was Kat Cole that I saw at a Service Titan conference that she was the CEO of Cinnabon, and then I can't remember her company now, Green something, but she was one of the best speakers I've ever seen. I think she's the only one that spoke that day that didn't have a teleprompter or didn't use a teleprompter, but she talked about the questions to ask in a one-on-one, and I loved them and I use them because it's, she said, and I even use these with my husband, and it was like, what was the best part of your last month? What was the worst part of your last month? What made you the most worried? I'm trying to think if there was a fourth one. The fifth one was, if you were me, what would you do differently to impact our company? And then that really opened it up the door for someone to be able to give you advice or give you, tell you something that they otherwise wouldn't. Because they don't want to make you feel like you're a bad leader and you're not making good decisions. But it's like, really,
I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember seeing her speak. That was at the Pantheon down in LA in 2022, wasn't it? Yeah. Cassie, amazing. You were there too.
In LA?
It was the one where Brad, what's his name, sang.
Oh yeah, I was there.
You were there. We were together.
Yeah, I was there, but I missed that. I probably missed it because I was on a panel, and I missed like so many things that happened at that. But I did go to Brad Paisley.
Yeah, that was fun.
I was there with her, so I can vouch.
Yeah, that was fun. She was one of the best speakers I've ever seen, and like I said, I was so impressed. She didn't even need her teleprompter or anything. Everybody else did.
You know who I loved at that too? We're reminiscing is Magic Johnson.
I didn't get to see him. I really wanted to.
He was very inspirational.
He's legit. Forget basketball. Like he's legit. That stuff.
Nick
well, that's what I love about these conferences too.
And I missed him too. I was sad.
Oh yeah.
I heard he was really good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
what were you saying, Heather?
That's what I love about these conferences too, because even if you're not part of a coaching organization and you attend, the Pantheon through Service Titan, they always bring in some of the most amazing speakers. I remember in 2019 they had David Goggins. He's an amazing speaker as well. And I think that that's a really maybe a stepping stone for some people who are smaller, just gotten onto Service Titan, don't necessarily belong to a coaching organization. They are getting a little bit of exposure exposure to some of that inspirational stuff that kind of drives all of us as leaders.
And Service Titan does have its own coaching involved with CSR side, especially because of their tool. So that's a great place to start. I mean, even if you're not even a Service Titan user yet, but you're thinking about it, that's an amazing conference. I just bought a ticket for it. We're not doing a booth, but I'm going to attend it.
Well, they always have like a new, like people, they invite people who are not part of Service Titan yet, so that they can get a little bit of exposure to it.
Yep.
Yeah. Listen, I heard the cost of that Pantheon gig one time and by accident, and I probably shouldn't.
It's like $25,000 and up for a booth. No,
it is. And not Power Women of the Trades will not have a booth there, respectfully, but not even just that, but it is such a production. And we should, whether you like Service Titan or not, you should really be thankful that we have such a organization that's willing to put on something like that for contractors, because I'm talking millions of dollars.
It's a great event.
Crazy. But anyways, it's really been nice to talk to you, Kelcey. If someone was listening and wanting to get more information about Service Business Evolution, what would they do?
Our website is www.sbe, Samboy Edward, because sometimes people don't, SBE Odyssey, and you spell Odyssey ODYSSEY. Sometimes people don't know how to spell that, .com. So SBEodyssey.com.
And we can be sure to include some contact information or some of those things in our show notes. But it's been great talking to you. And I think it's always good to reminisce on the paths of things. And I hope this episode was inspiring to someone who might be looking for that organization to jump into and to get that help. And it sounds like SBE has come, I don't want to say a long way, because like I said, 8 years ago.
Well, our coaching organizations have all grown with the industry too.
Yeah, every one of us has.
Where we were 10 years ago is not where the industry is now. And I love the coaching organizations that have embraced that and changed and pivoted their organization to fit the needs of what's actually going on in our industry.
Right.
Yeah, and I have nothing bad to say about any other coaching and training organization out there. They're all amazing. I think contractors should try us all.
For sure. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. And we
thanks for having me.
See you soon.
Okay.
This has been Power Women of the Trades. Like what you hear so far? Leave us a review at Apple. And make sure to listen to our other episodes wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.